Oh god, yeah.
Welcome back to another episode of the Between Buckets podcast. My name is Lucas Pearce, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend, Patrick Cross.
Pleasure to be here, Lucas. Exciting times.
It is. It's a fine Tuesday morning, Patrick. The sun is out. How's the weather in Canberra?
Cold and miserable. Nothing new.
As always. We've got an incredible show for you today. First, we're going to be talking about what we're buying and selling from the first week of NBA action. Then we're going to seamlessly transition to the Battle of Los Angeles. And then finally, we're going to talk about some of the outlandish MVP candidates that after a first week of impressive performances don't seem quite so outlandish. But first, let's take a break and hear from a quick plug.
If, like Lucas and myself, you enjoy a side dish of written analysis to go with the main meal, which is this podcast, then you should head to betweenbuckets.com. On the site, you'll find feature articles looking at topics such as Giannis's MVP defense, a critical year for Ben Simmons, and our top 25 player rankings heading into the 2019-20 season. Be sure to check it out, as there are some contentious names challenging conventional wisdom and some familiar faces in declining places. Also, be sure to follow Between Buckets on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for more updates and analysis. Back to the pod.
So, Patrick, it's been a huge week. There's definitely been some highs and lows depending on who you are and who you've unfortunately decided to root for. But first, let's talk about some of the things you're buying.
So week one down, there's a lot of takeaways, and it's difficult to sift through what's legit and what's a fake trend. But one I'm buying, one I think it's going to last throughout the season, is that the Raptors are still an elite Eastern Conference team. Elite. I think they're elite. They went 2-1 on the opening week. They beat New Orleans at home in overtime on the opening night, and they blew your boys in Chicago in a rout on the road. They did lose to Boston on the road, but I think so far that the eye-popping thing, which is keeping them in this Eastern Conference elite tier, in my opinion, is that Pascal Siakam has made the leap that his contract and his expectations have predicted.
So when you talk about elite, talk to me about your seeds. What do you think they're capable of?
Well, we've said it on this podcast before that I think, the top two Eastern Conference teams, Philly and Milwaukee, I'm not putting them in that kind of conversation.
Sure.
But I think in that next sort of tier down, that sort of 3 through 5 or 6, I think that's somewhere where the Raptors can still be. And I think a lot of people would have counted them out after Kawhi left in the offseason, of course.
It's interesting. We look at the record that they went on. I think they were 17-5 when Kawhi didn't play last season.
Yeah, and it's not just because of that record, because admittedly that record can be a little misleading because they really pumped up Kawhi's load management in the games where they were playing against bad teams, so they could still obviously win. But I just think Siakam has taken that next step, and we've seen it so far. We know how good he is defensively. He's taking, so far, I know it's a 3-game sample size, but he's taking 10 more shots than he did last season, including 3 more threes. He's shooting at a high percentage. He's grabbing all the rebounds that are around. The team seems to know that it's his team offensively now, but he's still got the veterans around him like your Lowry, Ibaka, Gasol. Even we might throw Van Fleet in that veteran discussion. He's still got those sort of supporting cast around, which I think have bought into this being Siakam's team, and I think they've still got the defense and sort of championship pedigree to still be one of the best Eastern Conference teams.
Siakam has been playing incredibly two-way. He is probably one of the more respected players in the league. I think he's definitely capable of putting himself in that top 3 conversation, particularly because of his efficiency. And yeah, I think the Raptors could really contend for that spot anywhere realistically between the 5th and 3rd seed in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, and I think with them losing the best player in the world, for them to be able to still have that kind of ceiling of potential, I think it might come as a surprise to few, but I think it rests squarely on Siakam. He's taken such a huge leap. I know with our top 25 player rankings in the prior to the season, a lot of people I was talking to were a little bit skeptical about how we put Siakam at. I think we put him at 20 from memory. But I think he's proven, it's only 1 week down, of course, but I think he's proven that he's in that mix now. I think he's pretty much a lock to be an all-star in the East this year if that keeps going. And I wouldn't even be surprised if he put it in an all-NBA type season.
I mean, he's definitely competed against the best. He's established himself in the games that count. My only question to you is, do you think that if this team continues to have the same level of success, and it is really buying into that 4th seed, 3rd seed, whatever it is, Masai Ujiri doesn't blow the team up? Do you think they forsake the rebuild if 20 to 30 games in they are, competing with the best of them?
Yeah, this is a tough one because before the season I was kind of in the view that I thought they were going to blow it up. Trade guys like, Gasol, Ibaka, maybe even Lowry, because they've got some value elsewhere. They've got a couple of years left on their contract mainly, and they're sort of getting up there in age, but they could still sort of help a contending team.
Well, Lowry's got that additional year extension, which is indicative of, I guess, some semblance of competitive inclination, because otherwise they probably wouldn't have paid him. And it was a hefty 30-something million 1-year extension, which is quite rare. Ibaka and Gasol are both in contract years, so that I don't think they'll extend them. But the fact that they're keeping them, is it possible they just let them walk with no return on asset?
I suppose it's possible, but I think it's feeling like they're going to give this team a run. I think the Eastern Conference is open. We've said it so many times before. And I think at this stage, it's looking like they're going to keep them together. And now this could come back in a couple of months and they could have the whole team sold and for future assets. But I think this is still a competitive basketball team. And I think looking longer term, add another piece or two to this team, and there's no reason why they couldn't be a championship contender again within the next few years. Because Siakam's still young, of course. OG Anunoby's coming back a little bit this season. They've got some exciting young pieces there, so I probably wouldn't be pushing the reset button anytime soon, personally.
I love it. I think just the tone they've set in Toronto about not giving an absolute fuck is fantastic. I think they just buy into their own little regime and see where it takes them.
Yeah,
which was the promised land last year.
What are you selling, Lucas?
Oh, I don't even know if we have to do it now, to be honest. So as we know, I passionately argued for why the Bulls could climb past all the bullshit that has been hindering all their success the last 5 years and re-emerge as a playoff, not contender, but someone that features in them briefly.
Little cameo in the playoffs.
Exactly, like a 4 or 5 gamer.
Just dabble in there. Maybe a gentleman's sweep at best.
Oh, it would have been against the number 1 team. Who are we kidding? But I did argue for it, and I'm not denying that. I'm not avoiding that. But there's one rule in the NBA season. For anyone injecting hope into a successful Chicago Bulls stint, 2019-20, you can't lose to fucking Charlotte on opening night.
I remember seeing that scoreline, laughing my head off, and then shooting you a text, how about those Bulls? And you just replied, I don't want to talk about it. And I was like, yep, look, fair.
It's just, who do they have when Terry Rozier is their best player? It's just, you can't lose that game. And I'm just watching it unfold, and I was screaming defense so loudly in my head because my throat had already been blown out by the first quarter that in the end I couldn't hear anything but the buzzer when it went off. And I realized how much of a moron I am.
You said they were going to make the playoffs.
And the one game that they're guaranteed, the one game that you kind of use as a case for, hey, we've got one under our belt, that's 1 win down, we only need another fucking 40. That went.
It was a little ripe opportunity sitting for you there. The basketball gods threw you a bone, gave you Charlotte Hornets on opening night, and you couldn't even snatch it up.
It was atrocious.
You were looking at a required 18 to 20 win leap from last season. Have you seen anything that gives you faith that any leap of that magnitude is still on the cards?
No, Markkanen has been an absolute mess.
I like Markkanen.
Oh, I do too. I think he's an incredible dream. I think that when you look at some of his numbers, you isolate them, you think about the glory days in the 90s, and you inject a little bit of D-Rose fanaticism in there that carried you through the first 4 years of his career. Markkanen sounds fantastic.
Young Dirk.
No.
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 No, it's offensive to even say that, isn't it?
No, I'm getting more and more worried because the last 2 games he's had 9 points in each, and he's shooting 40% field goal and 14% from the 3-point
Yikes.
line. So
Hey, at least you've got Kobe White.
the other thing is the young guys haven't quite figured out who they're playing under. Boylan is a stickler for really setting that stagnant pace, wearing a team down, and no one's really bought into the defense. Watching Charlotte cut us up like a bunch of 3-year-olds with plastic scissors and Play-Doh was traumatic. We didn't adjust, we didn't switch, we didn't understand the concept of help defense. There were times when Markkanen and Carter Jr., Carter Jr. is actually a great defender by himself, but he just wasn't getting there because no one was communicating. And the man would just go. And I was just watching these players jog back on defense, and I'm going, what? Do they realize we're in Charlotte?
I'm loving this just quietly.
It's also just like, when Charlotte can score in transition just as well as they are in ISO. Like, my goodness. And, you'd be like, oh, well, at least you've got some offensive capacity. I mean, do we? We don't have I think our cheat code at the moment is give Levine the ball and hope he can move his feet fast enough that he can run in and lay it in. And don't get me started on Otto Porter. Historically awful. 26% from the field.
Jeez.
And the worst part is I don't think we finished low enough to get a good draft pick out of this season.
No, that's the thing with the draft order changes that we've seen last season as well. Even if you tank it, you're not guaranteed anything.
I know.
So you're kind of stuck in this limbo where I think I remain on my stance that I don't think they're making the playoffs, but I also think they're going to win enough games not to have the highest odds in the lottery. And then you're almost sort of trapped in this perpetual state of mediocrity.
Exactly. We've been more inconsistent than the character development in the entirety of Game of Thrones last season. But we've also...
That's saying something, folks.
We're also...
If you're not a Thrones fan, that shit was all over the place.
We're also going to win, hopefully, more games. Well, actually, I don't even know. Have I finally forsaken hope and just resigned myself to tanking? I've never done that before. I got excited about the Zion prospects, but I was a realist there because I understood acutely the degree in which my team sucked.
Just quietly, you thought it was a lock that the Bulls were going to get Zion.
By the end, I was.
What were your odds again?
I don't want to talk about it.
That was a wild fantasy, that one.
But our next 5 games, Patrick, hear me out, and this is where I'll end on it because this isn't good for my heart. Our next 5 games include New York, Cleveland,
Ooh.
Detroit,
Yikes.
Indiana, and Los Angeles.
The Lakers.
Yes. Now, for those at home, everyone except the Los Angeles Lakers, we have a chance of beating. In fact, based on their rosters and their current records, we should at least win 3 out of those 5 games. And if we don't, not only does any of the playoff talk cease to exist, but we're not even going to win our projected over-under, are we?
No, I don't think so, by the looks of it.
Because this is what we don't understand. We get completely submerged in the excitement of a new NBA season, and we don't realize for those teams that don't have a shit's chance of finishing in the top 3, that every game bloody counts. And along this set part of the schedule where it's pretty bloody lenient, these aren't games... Sure, we lost to Toronto. I'm relatively not surprised by that, although I did expect them to compete a little bit more. But these are the games you're meant to win. And if we don't win these games...
There's not a lot of easy games out there. I think the Hornets should be the easiest W in the entire league.
Charlotte, we've talked about the fact that they could break the record for most losses in a season. And they
Doesn't
just
look like it anymore.
Yeah, we just prevented history, Chicago. We just we gave Charlotte a win
That was
on opening
that was
night.
a beautiful Bulls rant.
That's cruel to the Charlotte fans because it started to dawn on them how terrible this season was going to be, and they got a win opening night. So they've just got further to fall now. Anyway, take it away from me, Patrick. Just go on to something else.
That was fantastic. I was very close to going on a Spurs rant in that we almost lost to the Knicks and we needed a game winner from DeRozan to get past the Wizards. So that's not the most encouraging sign, but for now, I'll take the wins. Just quickly, one thing I'm going to sell and that I'm not buying so far this season is the Phoenix Suns. They got a lot of hype. They beat Sacramento by a lot. They lost in overtime to the Nuggets in a competitive game, and then they beat the Clippers. And people are starting to think, oh, are the Suns back? Have they clicked? Have they found it? And no, I'm not buying this. I'm not buying a Frank the Tank Kaminsky resurgence. I think Ayton missing his 25 games is going to stack up. I'm Australian, so I have to hate Ricky Rubio. I think it's a part of our national pledge, and his new teammate Aaron Baines should also hate him for his flops in the World Cup. But
Did
Rubio,
you just tell us to hate our own?
No, I think Aaron Baines should hate Ricky Rubio.
Oh, I was going to say.
No, I love the banger.
No, Baines is a legend.
Yeah,
he deserves a statue outside Sydney Airport.
That's some big statue.
Yeah, there'd be no point putting it in Canberra because no one flies there.
Rough.
Sorry, I'm still thinking about marking it.
But no, Ricky Rubio, I think we've already seen that he's injury prone. I think when he's out, they're playing Javon Carter at point guard, who doesn't exactly look like an NBA player. I don't actually hate Devin Booker as much as you do, and I think Oubre could be pretty good, and he started the season incredibly well. But I just think everyone needs to calm down a little bit on Phoenix. If we're looking at the next 5 games, they've got Utah, then at Golden State, at Memphis, then they've got Philadelphia and Miami at home. And if they beat a Utah and or Philly, or if they win the other 3 and compete with those 2, I'll start listening. But for now, I'm
yeah, I agree. The Suns might not be as awful as last year, but let's remember how atrocious they were. Currently, I can't see them in the 8. I can't see them in the 9. So let's just cool off.
Even if you improve, it's an improvement on so terrible that it just becomes slightly less awful.
I couldn't agree more. Anyway, I'm going to take a break because I need it.
Before you get those salty Bulls tears out.
I'm going to hydrate. I'm going to wet my face a little bit. We're going to come back revitalized. This is a call out for watch enthusiasts everywhere. The Quick20 Network is growing and we now have our very own watch hobbies website. So head over and visit thenextwatch.com. That's THENXT watch.com. With a ton of reviews, features and weekly columns on watches under 4 figures, thenextwatch.com has it all. Alright, Patrick. After the Zionless opening game between the Toronto Raptors and the New Orleans Pelicans, let's be real. This one felt like the start of the season.
This was the real opening night game, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, look, no disrespect to Canada, no disrespect to New Orleans. They fought well. It went into overtime, and it was just unfortunate that as it crossed into overtime, I realised I had to switch to watch, the opening night of the NBA season.
Yeah, it was actually an entertaining game that Pelicans-Raptors won, but I was definitely far more excited for the Lakers-Clippers.
Oh, I know. But so was, I think, 95% of the NBA world.
I thought it was an interesting game. I think it simultaneously showed a lot, but also we do have to modest ourselves a little bit that it is just the first game. They're going to play each other a few more times this season. I think we'll really be able to benchmark the performances of the two teams and how they directly match up with each other throughout the season. But I think the biggest takeaway for the Lakers, and I think Blind Freddy could tell you this, was their clear lack of depth brutally exposed them. I mean, looking through this box score now, if you want to read out some names that played some big minutes, you got Jared Dudley, Troy Daniels, you got Dwight Howard, Quinn Cook, KCP, all played 15 plus minutes, and the Lakers got nothing out of them.
I was at a mate's house watching this game, And as the Lakers came out firing all guns ablaze, AD doing those 360 post moves, laying it up, LeBron coming in hot, they went on this huge run. I think there was an 11-point differential within even the first quarter. And then there was 2 points between them as the first quarter closed. And as that buzzer went off, I told my mate, I give it about 4 minutes and then watch the Clippers bench just eat up whatever the Lakers have on the floor. And that's exactly what happened. Just mechanically, they're insane. And I didn't realize again how good they are. You forget that this is a team that took the Golden State Warriors with Durant in his prime, showing the world that he's the greatest player in the game at the moment, to 6 games. And just the way they dissect lineups, the way that they all hustle, the way that they play team basketball, I think it was that moment when you're like, shit, yeah, they're going to win this thing.
Yeah, the Clippers' depth and their benches was the clear distinguishing factor between these two teams. Obviously, we know how good LeBron and Davis are, and Kawhi and eventually Paul George will be amazing together. But if you just put those 4 players to the side for a second, if you played Clippers versus Lakers without those 4 stars, the Clippers would win in an absolute landslide. If you look at their bench, as I was comparing before the Lakers won, on the Clippers bench, you had 4 guys come off the bench. You had JaMychal Green, Montrezl Harrell, Mo Harkless, and Lou Williams. All played big minutes and all produced. I mean, Montrezl and Lou Williams played the most minutes of any Clippers, significantly. Lou Williams had 21 points, 5 boards, 7 assists. Montrezl, 17 points, 7 boards, 4 assists in 37 and 38 minutes, respectively. And I think the way they could just carve up not only the Lakers' second unit, but they were also doing it against the first unit as well. I think the Clippers have so many looks that they can throw at you, and the Lakers just, if they're not getting anything from their bench, they're not going to win games like this.
I completely agree. I think the other thing we need to take into account is how good Danny Green was. And I'm not saying that to bolster the argument that, hey, now the Lakers will come around. I'm saying that because if he doesn't shoot 7 from 9 from the 3-point territory, imagine the blowout.
Yeah.
Like it was 10 points between them by the end, and they'd eased off because, I think probably by the third quarter we all knew who was going to win the game. But imagine if Danny Green doesn't go off for a historical 28 points.
Yeah, that night he broke Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's record for most points in a Lakers debut. Danny Green broke Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's record. And I just think if they can have one of Danny Green's best games of his career.
Because he's going to have 4 or 5 of them this season.
Yeah, if he can have 28
he's
points
used up 1
with 7 threes and they still lose.
By 10.
That's a very concerning sign for Lakers fans.
And when you look at kind of some of the team-on-team stats, the field goal percentage, just on paper, speaks to just the systems they have in place. The Clippers move the ball, they cut in, they cut out, they lean a little bit left and right, as in they kind of adapt to the lineup that they're playing. Whereas the Lakers had one offensive set, and it was LeBron jog like a point guard, really sell the role, stop at the top of the 3-point line and throw it into Anthony Davis.
That's about it for their offense, isn't it?
And then, if shit hits the fan, lean on Danny Green,
who's definitely going to be
capable of eclipsing the feats of... Exactly, who's going to bail you out.
Do you think LeBron's a viable option at point guard for the Lakers?
Look, this has been discussed a fair bit in the media, and my short answer is no, because I think as the season goes on, and look, let's just take LeBron out of it. I think as the season goes on, and you're playing Anthony Davis in the post as much as they already are, as much as he doesn't want to be, because he loves to stretch it, and he can. It's not even, no connotation there. The dude is just flat out incredible, pretty much wherever he wants to be. But outside of his back to the basket, which is where I saw him score a fair few of his points on opening night, teams are going to adjust. And also, the reason, there was an incredible play where 3 of the Clippers players rotated and switched onto a new man because they were passing the ball around, and Danny Green was in the weak side corner. And the ball found his way to him, And every player had switched their man, but still had the speed and the hustle to get there and alter that shot. And they did. And you're just watching this going, they move as if they have this universal sentience. They're like ants. They're just moving as one. And it was just beautiful. If you're a Spurs lover, if you're a Boston 07-08 lover, the defensive capacity of this team is all time.
Yeah, the defensive capacity is through the roof. And just switching back to the Lakers for a second there, if we got Anthony Davis in the post, and we saw this a little bit in their first games and the later games, it's definitely something that they're going to look to a lot and that they should look to. But for post players, if you don't have guys stretching the floor around you, it's just going to be a simple and easy double team straight to them. You see it a lot with Embiid. Whenever he gets a post touch, especially in crunch time, it's an automatic double team. And if the team can't stretch the floor around him, then that double team's going to work. And Danny Green, as we said, is not going to shoot 7 of 9 every night. And they don't have a lot of legitimate spacing threats around them.
And that's why if that first pass that establishes Anthony Davis's position is coming from someone outside of LeBron, the options for the team are so much more deep because he can cut off the ball, he can shoot the ball, he can draw 2 defenders away. It was literally 2-on-5 for some of it. And then obviously once Danny Green got hot, that spaced the floor a little bit more. But yeah, I don't think it's viable. I also think that LeBron would be expending more energy, and it would be foolish to do so in the point guard position because, let's be real, they're aiming, worst case scenario, they're aiming just to get into the playoffs. And I'm not for an instant saying they're going to fail in that quest. I'm just saying that you want LeBron ready, prime, not wasted by the fact that he's 35 years old, 6'8", 115 kilos, expending all his energy on the point guard duties, particularly when Rondo or Alex Caruso could easily fit the bill, I think. You just need a good pass, and then you have so many more options.
Yeah, I think you don't want to... We all know that LeBron's basically de facto point guard, but I think there is a difference between him being a primary playmaking wing and actually playing a legitimate point guard, like it seemed he was for a lot of this game. And I think that's basically what they'll probably revert to in the playoffs, with LeBron's basically the point guard. But I think in terms of the regular season, you don't want to be burning 82 games of LeBron running the point. And I think I'm not a Rondo stan. I don't think he's the answer. I don't think Caruso, as much as the hype around him, I don't think he's that fantastic. But even if it's just for the regular season, to plug them in there, take some of the playmaking, ball handling duties off LeBron, and try and, lighten LeBron's load a little bit. So then come playoffs, I think it'll help. Then when you can trim your rotation a bit, bring it down to 7 or 8 guys, I think that sort of plays in the Lakers' favor.
And I'm sure you would agree with me that, as someone that has watched Spurs basketball in the early stages of the Tim Duncan dynasty, the way that he could circle with David Robinson and play high-low is really what they should be trying to emulate in at least some possessions, because if you've got LeBron high and you've got Davis doing what he does under the basket and then just surrounded by shooters, LeBron can pass with his back to the basket. The dude just has this capacity to know where everyone is. And the fact that, they're not utilizing half of what both of these players bring to the table, I think is very concerning early on.
Yeah, I was surprised that we didn't see as much direct two-man game between LeBron and Davis. I don't remember seeing that many pick and rolls between the two of them, which I think is it's arguably one of the most dangerous, at least on paper, offensive moves in the NBA right now.
Yeah, definitely. So all in all, I think when you look at where the Lakers team was opening night, I'm not surprised. I think that their title contention and the conversation around that literally stems from their two players. And I'm going to be honest, neither of them had a particularly good game that first night. But beyond that, there's so many kinks they have to sort out just to be a competitive first, second, third round playoff team. Because half of those players aren't playing crunch time. JaVale McGee, Dwight Howard, Avery Bradley, KCP, how many of those players, Patrick, are you leaning on in the last 2 minutes of a game that actually matters? Of an elimination game?
I definitely wouldn't trust them. And I think I threw it to you after the game that I think there is a wild argument, and bear with me here, that the Lakers need Kyle Kuzma as much or about the same as the Clippers need Paul George right now. And I think obviously Obviously, Kuzma and Paul George are incomparable in terms of their quality, but he just saw how good the Clippers are without Paul George, and I think the Lakers really need another body that they can throw out there who can shoot, who's long and big, and I think Kuzma's going to help the Lakers a lot if we can get back to where he was
that's the
playing
thing.
and maybe improve a little bit more.
Who's definitively counting out the Clippers if Paul George doesn't come back? And I know he's coming back. I'm, again, not saying he's going to sit this whole season out or not be himself. But let's say that he, for whatever reason, couldn't be there. That team could still compete, I think, with the best of them. And that's what's scary, because you're sitting there watching Harkless go hard on the defensive end, and then Jermichael Green just refused to miss from beyond the arc. And you're going, holy shit balls. Like, if PG doesn't come back, this team's still going deep in the playoffs.
They could still they still have a championship level ceiling without Paul George.
Kawhi had an average night.
Which is so scary.
Exactly.
Like, Kawhi only played 32 minutes, which is decent, but it's not that much.
He was solid, but he wasn't anything more than what we've come to expect. Like, he hasn't cranked it up yet. Obviously, he shouldn't have, because it's game one. But there is so much left for this team to unpack. And, I mean, Doc isn't wrong in that there is still a ways to go between the dynamics between Lou Williams and Kawhi. And they were already sound in that first night. But it's more just like, once they can buy into one another, and once the tone of, rather than you take the ball, I take the ball, kind of gets mellowed out and they mesh a little bit more, the potential there is, again, this team, I think it's the number one contender. I think this team is the one that you have to beat.
Yeah, I think bottom line from that opening game, the Clippers definitely asserted themselves as the favourite, and so far at least the best team in LA. I don't think either of us are giving up on the Lakers just yet, but I think that first game showed that they've got a long way to go, and the gap between them and at least the Clippers is pretty sizable.
We're going to take a quick break and go to our fun fact guy.
Today's fun fact takes us back to the year of 1891, wherein James Naismith, a Canadian-born gym teacher, would invent the game of basketball. Teaching at Springfield College, Naismith was tasked with designing a new indoor game that would remedy his students' frustration at not being able to play outdoor sport in the winter. Using popular sports like football, hockey, rugby, and lacrosse, Naismith devised 13 basic rules for a game he would christen basketball. In the very first match inside Springfield's gymnasium, Naismith secured peach baskets 10 feet high on either end of the court. Today's game, however, is not without changes to Naismith's initial creation. No longer is a jump ball undertaken after every bucket, and back then, dribbling was not allowed. It was the epitome of pass-first basketball. What has been preserved is Naismith's legacy, the Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield being named after him. Back to you, boys.
For this season, Patrick, who do you have as a guy that's really shifted himself not into an MVP candidate, not into an MVP dark horse, but someone that just isn't quite so crazy as previously thought?
Yeah, I think this is the classic week one reach, but I think there is a little bit of something in here. And I think this conversation starts and ends with Karl Anthony Towns. Of course, we know he has set the world on fire this first week. He's played 3 games. They've won all of them. He's averaging 32 points, 5 assists, 13 boards, 3 steals, 2 blocks. His shooting splits are phenomenal. I think that battle that he had with Kyrie Irving that first game, and to be able to, Kyrie drops 50 on opening night, but then you look at Towns, who's hit 30 plus points, he's got 15 boards, he's got 7 threes, and you just think this guy's ceiling is absolutely through the roof.
Exactly. I feel like a lot of his skill set aligns with Anthony Davis, except this dude can shoot the ball. Did you see some of those step back threes off the crossover?
It's incredible watching a guy his size shoot that well, and I think that's really what separates Towns from a lot of the other big men out there. I wrote about it in that big man article, but his 3-point shooting it's not just good for a big man, it's elite for any player. So he's definitely had an incredible open week and boosted his stock absolutely through the roof.
So what? All right, let's indulge in this a little bit more. What would it take for him to put himself in a more legitimate conversation?
Probably pigs would need to fly across Minnesota. But
there'd have to be a mutation where they inherited wings.
there'd have to be a few, and by a few I mean 10 to 15 significant injuries, unfortunately. But
What, in the league or on the roster?
throughout the league. Karl Anthony Towns, let's just put this bluntly and frankly, he's not winning MVP this season, and he's not even in, that top 3 to 5 mix, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But if we're indulging in this little speculation game, then I think obviously the T-Wolves would need to make the playoffs, which
It would translate to how many wins, Patrick?
we're looking at definitely above 500, so we're probably looking at that sort of 45,
Yeah.
give or take a few games,
I
that sort of
agree.
range.
I think 44 is a good start.
That's probably the floor of an 8 seed in the Western Conference, which I don't really see happening for this T-Wolves team. But if he were to, let's say, the T-Wolves do grab that 8th seed, then I think it becomes a little bit of a discussion then.
Oh, I agree. I think Caesars Palace projected them to have about 35 wins, and whilst you don't put a lot of you don't necessarily put a lot of credence into the betting world and their projections, it does say that at least they're conscious of the fact that they're going to be quite poor comparatively to the rest.
Yeah, and it's conscious that it would require a 9 or 10 game
Exactly.
jump
It's a
over
starting
where
point.
The market experts predict them.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a reach, but if Towns can keep putting up numbers like this, then he's kind of going to force his way into the conversation at this rate.
Yeah, those numbers and a playoff berth, he would get talked about. Let's leave it there.
Yeah. Who have you got? Outlandish MVP.
Luka Doncic springs to mind. Over the
He's
first
incredible. I love Luka. I'm very much on this bandwagon.
Over the first 3 games, they're 2-1. He's averaging 29 points, 7 assists, 10 rebounds, 2 and a bit steals, no blocks whatsoever, but on a 50-31-79 shooting split. They're projected to win around 41 games, and again, being in the Western Conference, for him to have any legitimate shot at being talked about or even discussed, they'd need to hit that 44 win mark, and obviously a playoff berth that comes with it. I just think that watching him play, watching Porzingis space the floor and refuse to post up like a 7'1", 7'2" man should, they just might do it because what they have has worked so far. And you can get lost in just the youthful exuberance that they display on offense and the way it translates to something that's pretty effective, really.
Yeah, I think this Luka conversation is a little bit more plausible than the Towns conversation in a sense. I think Towns is the better player, of course, and I think Towns has started the season better. But I think if we're looking at the Mavs versus the Timberwolves in terms of which could make the playoffs, obviously I don't think there's room for the two of them. I think the Mavs making that leap and getting into the 8th seed is just a bit more plausible than the T-Wolves. And it rests squarely on the fact that if you look at Doncic's next best player on his team, which is Porzingis, and who's Towns' next best player? Is it still Wiggins?
It's a Kogi.
And I think the T-Wolves probably have a bit more depth, but I think so far at least Doncic and Porzingis, they have such a dynamic and incredible ceiling as a duo.
And they also have a coach that we trust in. And I'm not saying that Ryan Saunders is incompetent. I'm just saying that this is Rick Carlisle we're talking about. This is a dude that drew up players that thwarted LeBron's first year in Miami and competed before that and got the best out of Dirk. I trust this coach.
Yeah, he's going to be
Look what he's worked
considered
with.
one of the best coaches in the league. He hasn't had a lot to work with. And also, I feel obliged, just switching back to Doncic for a second, I feel obliged to remind everyone that this guy was taken below DeAndre Ayton, who's suspended for 25 games, and Bagley, who's already injured this season. It's still, I think it's outrageous that he wasn't taken number 1 pick. I know you can say that this is, revisionist building into the hype, but you could tell before the draft that he was better than those 2 players. Do you think Devin Booker is scratching his head wondering right now why he's playing with Javonte Sorry, why he's
Exactly,
playing
why he's playing with that guy.
Yeah, sorry, I've forgotten his name for a second.
So is
I
he.
think why he's playing with Graham at point guard and Ricky Rubio at best when he could have Luka next to him.
Oh, look, he'd probably be quietly fuming. However, to legitimize this case a little bit further, I'm thinking Doncic would have to average north of 26, 27 points, keep that same assist total of 7 a game, and his boards would have to be up there as well. The only other thing that concerns me is his three-point shooting. It's still, obviously, early days, but 31% I don't think gets it done, because eventually, across a longer season, I think it translates more to some avenues of inefficiency. Outside of that, yeah, look, the Mavs are already projected by a lot of different agencies to cross that 41 mark, and I think an extra 3 or 4 if they start off hot now isn't outrageous.
Yeah, especially if we've seen the Kings have started a lot slower than a lot predicted them, and that's definitely in part due to that Bagley injury.
And Chicago's handing out wins.
Yeah, so there's an easy
There's
1 or 2
two.
there for Western Conference teams.
The Mavs probably will beat Charlotte too while we're at it.
Yeah, that must be exciting. But no, I think Doncic in that MVP discussion, obviously, it's still, the darkest
It's
of dark
crazy.
horses, but it's a bit less crazy than it was a week ago, and as is the title
It's
of
a
this
great
segment,
way
if
of
you will.
looking at it.
There we go. The third guy,
I might title that my autobiography.
a little bit less crazy.
Than it was a week ago. All right, what do we got, Patrick? Last guy. Let's
We've got
close
one
this.
more player on this list, and I feel obliged to throw him out there, even though I'm not his biggest fan personally, but I think we'll be copping the hate mail from our Between Buckets followers out there if we don't mention him, and it's Trae Young. His averages at the moment are pretty phenomenal. He's got 38 points, 9 assists, 7 boards, over 1.5 steals, and his shooting is 58% from the field, 55% from 3, and they're 2-0. So I feel obliged to throw him out there, but I am not buying this one.
No, I feel like we talk about Young because we've talked about Doncic, and it's the same discourse, as in this is a fresh player off his rookie season coming in and putting up incredible numbers, having a great start to the season, and I think it's more, Doncic is the more compelling case because I think his team, as you've already said, makes more noise, and that's part of the reason we have to talk about Young, because if they make the playoffs and he averages 26, 25 points, he's gonna get the same amount of assists because he did it last season. I think the boards are a bit of a misnomer, but because I can't see him launching himself off the ground and getting a board 7 times a game.
No. And I think I got to give Trae Young a little bit of credit, because when that initial Doncic for Young deal was announced, I thought it was highway robbery and one of the biggest steals, one of the best lopsided trades in recent history. But I think Trae Young has done well to make it a little bit more of a conversation between Young and Doncic. But I think anyone that seriously thinks Trae Young is on the same level as Doncic, I think is dreaming. I think his shooting is good, and he's been scorching hot this first week, but I think it's overrated. I think the fact that it's compared to Steph Curry it's just blasphemous. I know he can hit a couple of shots from the logo, but his efficiency from deep, at least last season, was not anywhere near the Curry level. I think his playmaking is actually legit. I think he's a fantastic pick and roll guy. But if we're looking even in this first week, his turnovers are over 5 a game, and his defensive numbers are still atrocious.
That's the dampener on this whole situation. The 5.5 turnovers speak to last season. They also speak to his development and also what needs to continue to develop.
Yeah, and I know he's being asked to do a lot. His usage rate is through the roof, and he's still got, young / subpar talent around him, so turnovers are going to happen. But I just think you can't trust him on the defensive end. I don't think he has the size or athleticism to be able to compete. I don't think he's ever going to be a great defender, let alone a good one. And I just don't love that sort of undersized, non-defensive minded point guard, because we haven't seen them really succeed in playoff runs in a while now.
I mean, if we look at it and we look at what makes a team competitive, it is covering your weak bases, and the better teams in this league are going to switch Young every chance they get and just abuse him offensively. Because, yeah, I think he is one of the worst defenders in the league.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people would point to the famous comparison with Trae Young, which is Steph Curry, and say, oh, well, Curry's not the best. And we're going back there again because I just think it's ridiculous that they're brought up in the same breath. But I know a lot of people will look at Curry and say, well, you know, he's a great shooter and not the best defender, but Curry's defense is wildly better than Trae Young's.
Yes, and the other thing is, at the moment, Young doesn't have the personnel to dress him up defensively. No one's covering his own errors, and that probably isn't going to happen for a little while longer. But anyway, I think, look, he belongs in the outlandish week one conversations.
Super outlandish, if you ask me.
I couldn't
but
agree
yes,
more.
When you average 38 points across, 2 wins, 9 assists, we probably have to throw you a bone.
It's out of respect. Shout out to Trae Young.
Shout out, reluctantly.
On that note, Patrick, I think we're going to leave it there.
Sounds good to me. I hope you. I hope the Bulls can get a win for you and you can recover, because it's going to be a sad couple of weeks.
Oh, mate.
Sad few months, really.
A sad couple of years. Why are you even being nice about it?
You could have had Zion, my friend.
I know.
You could have had him.
And you had Kawhi.
Oh, okay. That one hurts even more. At least we got a championship out of Kawhi.
Yeah, look, I'm going to go hard.
At least we got one. You're not getting anything from Levine.
Nah, but anyway, you have an incredible day, my man. I'll talk to you soon.
Catch you later.
Take it easy. Bye.